My guest today is Kevin Gibbons. He's the founder and CEO of a digital marketing agency, ReSignal, in London, England, and the winner of multiple search awards. ReSignal was recognized as one of the fastest growing digital marketing agencies by Deloitte and focuses on driving organic growth for their clients. Thanks for joining me today, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, John. Looking forward to it.
I'm excited to learn a little bit about your journey, a little bit about how you became a digital marketer. So let's start off with that. Maybe give some back history about how did you get into this industry, even like your previous life.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I'm from the sort of generation that I fell into what I'm doing as opposed to it as a plan. I think you now find there's generations that are coming through, maybe at a graduate level, that have studied and learned how to do digital marketing or SEO in particular, maybe as part of a university course. For me, that was just completely unheard of. It was just at a stage of how do we figure out what we're doing as we go along. And in many ways, I really enjoyed that. That was the challenge of learning. So I guess the initial start of the story for me would be, I was a student in 2003. I did a placement year at a web design agency that was a real eye-opener for learning. They kind of one of the companies that they chucked me in at the deep end. I did quite a lot of different things, from web development to sysadmin through to dealing with client customer support, and SEO was one of those things as well. So I feel like in the early stages, got a taster to a bit of everything, which was great because I was still kind of, 22, 23 years old, figuring out what I wanted to do. And from there, I could, try a few things, figure out what I probably firstly didn't like, or I wouldn't say didn't like, but definitely didn't have a passion for. And then from an SEO perspective, that was something that was just very fresh, new and exciting. And it's evolved and developed a lot in the 17 years since. But initially it just got me hooked by being able to test things as a student and see what the impact was. And I always liked the idea of how do I make myself some money online? And as a student, when you're looking for some extra cash, it's quite appealing.
Amazing. So how did you start your agency? How long before earning a lot of experience and, learning from some of these other business owners before you decided to kind of branch off and do your own thing?
So I started an agency in 2006. And
Okay.
So I guess looking back, I'd have had 3 years experience at the time of doing SEO for clients, for myself. I built my own affiliate websites, and I probably in 2006, it's one of those where I'm not even sure I would say I started an agency. I was probably more freelance, but I wanted to look more professional. And so I set up a brand name called SEO Optimized, which later became an agency. And developed from there. But I essentially in 2006 to 2007 did the student year out thing. I traveled and spent a year in Australia,
Nice.
living mainly in Brisbane and Sydney, and on the side built enough cash through my own website properties that I'd built, and some consulting with clients that I'd attracted some clients along the way, that essentially allowed me to pay for my year whilst I was away. So it was something that I think I only realized by the time I was back that, actually this could be my real job. Before, I think I really took the pressure off that by saying I'm going to travel for a year, and if I can pay for some of my bills while I'm away by doing some work and more kind of like affiliate income and freelance consultancy, then I'm more than happy with that. It allows me to spend a year in Australia, and that's great. And I'll figure out getting a job or whatever else when I get back.
That's amazing to hear, because I've been reading a lot about like the vagabonding and kind of understanding, what goes through people's mind, right? When they're in 20s, they kind of want to uncover what's going on in life. Where do they want to go? What's the sense of purpose or passion? What does meaning really mean, right? Like, and that's where you discover. And you were able to travel and kind of figure it out where your strengths were, where it lies on, and optimize and make some money along the way, which is amazing to hear, because a lot of people don't have that drive, right? And for you to do and have the foresight to do that, and also have a sense of travel and enjoying before settling, and before understanding, like, if there are other things that are more important, like if you have a family and things that you want to really settle and
It
buy
will
a
get
home and
harder and
stuff.
harder later in life. So it's definitely, I remember I went for a job interview in Oxfordshire, and the person interviewed me as I come out of uni had said, "Why don't you go traveling to Australia, Southeast Asia?" And I tried to give the right professional answer, which was, "Oh, I'm excited to start a career and I want to do all of this." And I remember his response was, "Why not? Why wouldn't you go?" It's like, "I would if I was you." And I remember I left that interview and I didn't get offered the job. But at the same time, it made me think, well, actually, if I'm going to do it, now is the time. And I do believe in trying, I think this has been a theme of my life in many ways, of trying to take the pressure off. And as much as I've always looked at long-term vision, where do I want to be, etc., in a lot of cases, the best things in my life have come from actually, how do I just make a start? How do I try something because I'm curious, and let's just see where it takes me? And I think certainly from a career perspective, that was definitely the case here. It wasn't, how do I grow an agency to be 20 people, et cetera, et cetera. It was, how do I go to Australia and come back so that I'm not in a load of debt. And that was it. And it was as simple as, okay, well, I need to make, I don't know, maybe £1,000 a month or whatever it was in terms of living expenses with the exchange rate. How do I start there? And if I can do that, then that's the barrier that I'm aiming towards. And then break it down step by step in terms of how I can get to the next level. And like, there's always a next level, but it's not trying to get too far ahead of yourself.
Exactly. And I love the fact that you have short-term goals, right? And then really don't really dream too big, but always have that in the behind the scenes, right? Like, have that in the back of your mind, where you do want to reward yourself by achieving, but start off small by taking risks, right? And being curious, like you mentioned, and always wanting to learn, right? And that's another thing as an entrepreneur. So how did you come about? It's like, coming back after traveling and doing what you did, to kind of settling, and then deciding that you wanted to scale and run a real digital agency. Like, how did that come all about?
So the decision process, when I came back, my plan originally was I would get a job. Um, when I got back, I was, and again, I don't see this as being incredibly successful, but I was in a position where what I was making for affiliate income plus consultancy was the same as a job. So I was then in this situation of, okay, well, I'm looking to apply for a job, but then I wouldn't have time to do what I'm doing. And I kind of already have a job, so why don't I carry that on? Um, and then just coincidentally, I had an email out the blue from someone that had just won a Oxfordshire Small Business of the Year award and had just left that business. And he was very interested in Google AdWords. I'd done quite a bit of Google AdWords myself, just because I was curious, and it was the only certification that I knew of in digital marketing at the time. So I thought, well, that's a good thing to have as a string to my bow more than anything else. And we had a couple of meetings, and he wanted to start an agency. And I was in a position that I had clients and expertise, but didn't really know anything about running a business. And actually, it just became clear that, okay, this is a good opportunity of, why don't we try and do something together? And I've probably, even so now, but definitely at the time, have never really been aggressive on growth. I've always looked at, how do I do good work for clients? And through that work, we'll grow with the clients that we have. We'll have good case studies and stories to tell, and we'll attract referrals from those clients and maybe other people that hear about our work along the way. But the idea of actually how do we turn this into a company was quite new to me. And I think on my own, I may not have done that. I think I might have I've been happy with what I had to keep my own time busy. But when it got full, I might then have, I don't know, maybe gone down a different route, charge more money or something like that, but probably wouldn't think of how do I hire someone? How do I get someone else to do the workload? And then once they're busy, how do we get someone else to do that as well? And I think that was something where actually having a partner at that stage in time, I think really helped just to bring a bit of experience that I didn't have. And also there's a lot of pressure, I think, on entrepreneurs to do everything, certainly at first. I mean, I'm now a solo shareholder and entrepreneur, but I've done that kind of for a while now, and I have different mentors around me. So, but I think in the early days, actually having a partner and someone that can help to bounce ideas off of, and when times are bad, you know that, okay, I'm not the only one that's not getting paid, someone else is, like stuff like that, I think really helps from a reassurance perspective.
So how did you go about, like, did you leave on good terms? Did you kind of want to branch off on your own? Or how long did you work with this other individual before you decided to become a sole entrepreneur?
Yeah, so we grew the company for 6 years.
Okay.
And so from maybe 5 years, I think it's 2012 that we split. And I think in hindsight, I think it was very successful. It went well. We grew quite quickly. We were Deloitte Fast 50 listed as one of the fastest growing companies in the UK. And I think really we just reached, I would say, just different roads in our life of where we wanted to get to. And I'd had quite a lot of stuff going on personally. So my dad unfortunately died from cancer in 2012, and just from a life-changing moment, that was for me a realization of just life's too short. And I realized that probably related to that personally, maybe more than I realized at the time, as opposed to business, I was going into work and I just wasn't enjoying myself. And I think actually it's one of those that, looking back now, I think I should have just took time off. I should have said, I'm not going to come back for 3 months, and I'm just going to switch off and do whatever I need to do. And I think it's much easier to say that in hindsight, but at the time I was much more of the mindset of, I'm going to throw myself into work. I'm not particularly happy with some of the things that are happening, and having 50% control and a deadlock and nothing happening was frustrating me. And again, in hindsight, probably much more so because of the personal situation I was going through. But it was enough for me to say, okay, well, I want 100% control of my own destiny, and I want to do things my way, and ended up splitting the company in half and essentially starting again in 2012. So I created a new brand name, and we grew and developed from there. So I think there's definitely learnings that I've had, both on a positive and negative side, but I think where we are now is in a good place, because I have been able to apply those learnings. I feel like a lot of what I've done has been learning from mistakes. Like I mentioned, we were fast growth listed first time around, but we actually grew twice as quick second time around. And I feel like the reason for that is because I'd learned a lot of lessons of what to do and what not to do at the first time of asking. At the second time, I didn't make the same mistakes, and equally, I'd grown my own reputation, network, knowledge, relationships, etc. that comes with that, to the point that winning clients was easier, and winning bigger clients was easier than it had been in the past, because I'd already established a certain level of credibility in the market that I would have had to build from scratch from the first time around.
That's amazing to hear. And I love the fact that you're being vulnerable as well, right? And self-reflecting, which is so important because as you know, and we spoke about this before the session started, Robin Sharma is someone that you look up to. And it's all about like mindset, right? And it's all about like being aware of where you're at, where other people are at, and it might not be in alignment, right? And having that complete control is something all entrepreneurs want, right? Because if you
Yeah, exactly.
dictate and, you know, come up with your own schedule and decide who to hire and fire and run the show, that's ultimately the pinnacle of entrepreneurship.
It absolutely is, and I've always loved having kind of 100% accountability. And I've spoken to a lot of people that are maybe in employed roles, and I've said to them things like, "I love the fact that if everything fails, it's all my fault." And some of the people's expressions on their face when they look at it, it's like, I feel like sometimes people can hide behind excuses too much, and I would and again, I'm probably the last person to give myself credit. I think if things go well, I would like to think I've had something to do with it. But I can almost look at it on the negative side of, even if things didn't go well, if I try my best, I'm happy. If I know I've given everything, you can't control the result, but you can control your effort. And I think for me, that mindset of being accountable to, if I put the work in, I'll hope for the results. There's no guarantee whatsoever, but I'm accountable for this, good or bad. And I feel like to be an entrepreneur, you need that mindset. If you're going to hide behind excuses, then I think you're much more likely to fail. Whereas if you can grab them and don't don't have this blind faith that everything you're going to do is going to work, but you have to learn from what you're doing, and you have to have a certain level of optimism in order to take that step, for sure.
That's awesome. And then regarding like growing up, right? Did you ever want to be like an entrepreneur or business owner? Like, what did you want to be? And then how did you like, were there other people that you looked up to growing up that you said, look, I really admire and I aspire and want to be similar to that person. What can I do to get there kind of thing?
I'm not even sure I ever knew what I wanted to be growing up. I know I had a phase of I'd love to be a pilot. I've always liked to travel,
Nice.
from family holidays in the early days, and even now I still travel, like pre-COVID at least, quite a lot.
Yeah.
Um, that was something that appealed to me, but I can't say I ever went down a studying route to get there. By the time it was kind of college and university days, that thought had completely left me. I've always been quite sports mad. I was keen on being a football
Football
journalist
player.
at one point in time, and I think
Nice.
that was again for the reason of I'd like to go watch football matches as much as possible. But I think um, the entrepreneur side of things, I think, has come from accountability. I've always liked being accountable for my work, and I've always liked, again, kind of the early days for sure. If you go back to being a student doing SEO for my own websites, I loved the fact that I could make a change today and I could see the results tomorrow. And like that instant, very quick feedback of, in the early days, it would have been, I'm making like £5 a day, maybe less, on a website for affiliate income. But that felt so much more important than the money valuation behind it, because it was just that I'm doing something for myself. So I grew into this entrepreneur way of doing things without realizing that I was, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's just, how do you take something that is making £1 or $1 a day, how do you turn it into 5, 10, etc.? And that's what's excited me. And I also think as things have developed, it's become more about how do I grow a business as opposed to how do I do the initial craft that got me into this. So SEO is the certainly the skill set that got me into being an entrepreneur. But I feel like now actually I love to run a business, and I think that you could almost take the subject matter to a certain extent, and I think it could be transferable. But the skills and the conversations I've had with all sorts of people that run completely different businesses have been the same. It's how do we grow? How do we hire great people? How do you deal with challenges? They're widespread across every company in the world. It's not just specific to the one specialism that you have.
Yeah, exactly. Like leadership is definitely a strong asset. And owning your own business, taking it from a solopreneur to, 5, 10, 20, 100 people, it's different in all aspects, right? Like you need different traits and characteristics, and there's different people along the line that you need to really turn to. So a question I wanted to ask you, did you have mentors or coaches throughout those years? And how did you, become, you're fairly successful and you're younger. So how did you get to that stage quicker? Was it people that you kind of turned to, or how did you, yeah, if you can share that.
Um, I've always got myself quite involved within industry events and networking and speaking to other people in similar roles. And I think I've always been quite open and transparent. So I think sometimes you can have almost like fake conference conversations of how are things going? Things are really going well. We've just grown from 8 people to 10. Like stuff like that drives me mad because
Yeah, yeah, of course.
it just
It's
feels
all
fake.
fluff. It's not
Yeah,
reality, right?
exactly. And it's kind of like it's not that I want to focus on negative. Actually, if anything, I'd say I'm a very positive person. But I think just being open and admitting, okay, well, here's some of the challenges we've had. Have you had problems like that before? And just dealing with that. And I think nothing's ever new. There's always someone out there that's dealt with something similar as a challenge before, and it's always specific. It's to you. It's my own story and my own decision on what I do next. So I don't think there's ever a clear-cut answer from someone else, but I can learn from their perspectives. And I think in the early days, that was just by surrounding myself with other people that maybe ran similar companies, and I could just be friends with them more than anything else. And I'll help them, they'll help me. I think over maybe second time around as a business, I have had more mentors, and I've looked at different people that have helped me from a agency leadership perspective to a business growth, more financial way of looking at things as well. And I think it's just filling in the blind spots. So having different people at different stages of the journey has definitely helped me, because I think what I've really got value for from a mentorship perspective is you don't know what you don't know. And with some mentors, I've worked with them to the point that they've been great, but I'll reach a certain point where I'll ask them a question and I'll answer it before they've even said anything. And I will answer it in the same way that they will answer themselves. And that's where actually that piece of mentorship has paid off, because they've been teaching me to the point that I now know what to do. But I found it certainly useful. We have Mike Landers, our chairman right now, and he's got a very mixed background as a kind of management consultancy through KPMG, procurement director roles. And that is very much a relationship where he will challenge me and ask me questions that, if I'm honest, sometimes they might even frustrate me, because it's just like, oh, I didn't even want to think about that, but you're right. So yeah, I think actually the side of things of being asked questions that I didn't even know to think about in the first place has been very valuable, and it means that if I don't get challenged on those things, I have to learn the hard way by making the mistakes. So if I can learn from the mistakes before I make them, that's beneficial for sure.
I think you hit it on the nail on a couple aspects where it was like having other people look at your company from a different perspective, right? Because you're so in it, you're living, breathing it on a daily basis, and you're blinded by what really is things that really move the needle and matter, right? So having, chairs or other people looking at it that will give you positive, constructive feedback, and they're honest and genuinely in it for the right reasons, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's where mentoring really helps you and can elevate you, right? Because then you can actually look back and make little adjustments and pivots and changes, as opposed to go blind, right? Like you mentioned, blind spots. And it's hard, right? As a business owner, you think you know everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you think you're doing everything the right way. However, it's always good for other people to give you feedback and take it, with your own criticism, but it's all about like absorbing it and taking what you feel would be great for where you're at today, right?
And I think there's a balance as well. I think sometimes in the past, I've gone from being an extremely decisive person to actually trying to involve more people in that. And I probably now, I think I turned the dial too much the other way.
Yeah.
I think in the early days, I was very decisive in the sense of I would just make decisions because I'm just like, I just want to move. I want to be quick. And if we go in the wrong direction, we'll learn quickly and we'll readjust course and then we'll fix it. And I think as a startup and a growing company, I actually think that served us quite well because I don't think we went too far off course. We definitely made more mistakes than we would have if we really would have thought it through. But at the same time, sometimes, although this sounds counterintuitive, sometimes I think it's better to move backwards than it is to stand still. Because if you're moving backwards and making a wrong mistake, but learning from it, you can then move forwards. But if you're at a deadlock, you can't go anywhere and you just feel like you're standing still. But then it reaches a certain point, certainly as you grow a team, in a lot of cases, I think because I've come from that background of, yeah, just tell me what to do, or like, just ask me your opinion and I'll tell you what to do. I'll make decisions and then I realize, well, if the team isn't bought into this, why aren't they getting it? Why aren't they doing it? And I've realized it's because I've just told them what to do. There's no autonomy from their perspective around this. And although I'm 100% convinced this is right, if they're just being told what to do, they don't have that level of enthusiasm. And I feel like I've now learned to dial that back a little bit and say, what do you think? How do I be more involved into other people in the team? And if they're involved and feel like they are part of that process, then firstly, it helps to see my blind spots that I might not have seen before. But secondly, I feel like actually this approach, although I've almost had to train myself to do it and it's a bit painful at first, has allowed me to go faster because as a team, everyone can take us further forward as opposed to it just being me. And I've definitely reached a stage in that journey where I was the bottleneck on too many things. And that's because I'm too accountable in many areas of like, yeah, if it all goes wrong, just blame me. I've never had a problem with that. But at the same time, it's definitely about getting kind of the whole team behind you and a range of different perspectives that you wouldn't have seen previously.
Yeah, and I love where you mentioned like getting other people involved where they hold themselves accountable and letting them make mistakes and fail, right? And it's all about the evolution of leadership, right? It's all about lead by example, but also give them responsibility enough for them to make their own decision and autonomy, right? Once you get to a point where you can definitely make that choice, but you want them to actually grow and evolve as humans as well. That's where it elevates you to be a better leader than you imagine.
It does, and I think again, it's learning to hold back.
Yep.
There's some instances I might see our team making mistakes, and then in the past I would definitely have called them up on it, and I feel like now quite often I ask myself, is this fixable? If this is something where it's like I see them making a mistake and we're going to lose a client and it's going to be a disaster, etc., I'll step in, I'll do something about it. If I feel like we've made a mistake, but actually sometimes it's better to let people make some of their own mistakes and learn from it, then I feel like I let things go more now. A team might still laugh at me saying this, honestly, but I do feel like I let things go a lot more now than I definitely would have in the past. Because if it's something that we can recover afterwards, then as long as there's not too much damage that's done, ultimately in the long term, I feel like those lessons are better learned the hard way. That's certainly the way that I've learned most things.
And I think it also gives you better peace of mind because then you're not in every situation, right? And that's
Yeah,
what I kind of learned as well. It's like let other people make mistakes, learn and evolve or fail, right? And get better and learn from them, right? And that whole evolution of you doing it all the time for many, many years, now I want others to do the same thing to then become better leaders, to then have a team and structure. Like everything is like a cycle, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's the whole, like Robin Sharma is a good example of, he talks quite a lot about how the best leaders create leaders.
Yes.
And it's not about being a manager, which is telling everyone what to do and report to me. It's about actually leading by example, holding people to account, but showing them the way of, okay, well, this is how you lead, and you can own this part of the business, and you can take that forward in the way that you think is best. You still hold them account to the results, but it's not the same as controlling absolutely everything in the way that they do it.
Exactly. No, that's awesome. So over the last couple of years, I know you've been running a very successful agency. Can you give some advice on things that kind of you would provide for entrepreneurs? Like, what would you tell some of them that are just starting off or thinking of starting a business? What would you advise some of them, these people?
Um, some of my advice is don't get too carried away on what I would call almost like ego vanity metrics. So in the past, I feel like we've grown quite a lot in headcount, revenue, number of clients that we service. And I feel like externally, and again, this is maybe like the networking story of, that sounds exciting. It's like, oh, you must be doing well. And you don't know. I like the expression of don't judge your inside to someone else's outside. And I think that applies at a number of different levels, from maybe a mental health perspective all the way through to a company perspective. But I think what I take from that is, just because that company is employing people, they're winning lots of clients, etc. Is that success? And I feel like actually you should define your own metrics of success. And basically that shouldn't be external in terms of how do you judge yourself versus someone else. I feel like I've always been very competitive with myself, but I really couldn't care less about how we perform against other people or companies. And I much prefer it that way, because it's like I want to keep improving, and I want to make sure that we're getting better. But am I going to judge ourselves against another competitor on a metric that I don't really think matters? No. Um, so yeah, I think for me, those metrics are important. For me, myself, is actually, are we taking on clients that we feel like we're doing good work, but adding value? They're the type of clients that we enjoy working with. And yeah, it just feels like more of a sense of purpose. I think when it comes to financial, I think again, like from an agency perspective, profits can be a afterthought quite often. Certainly in my early career, I think it was much more about how do we grow revenue as much as we can, and then our profits are whatever we've had left at the end. And I think now actually it's being a bit more selective over, okay, what type of clients do we really want to win, and which are the ones that will drive us profit, as opposed to let's just take everything that's out there and comes our way. And that just comes with experience. So I think actually just knowing what you really want, and do the typical business technique of the 5 whys. Ask yourself, if your answer is we want to get to £1 million turnover, £10 million turnover, etc., why do you want to get there? What is that going to enable for you that you're not able to get without it? And I think the more that you ask deeper questions like that, the more you get to the root of what is it you're really trying to do. And quite often you're probably closer to where you want to be than you realize. It's just what you really want to achieve is potentially different to what you think success looks like initially, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of business owners who are just thinking, especially during this pandemic, right? People have a lot more time and they don't know what stable income really is, right? They either work for themselves or
Yeah.
they go get a job, right? But how are these other companies surviving during this time, right? Everyone has an idea. Everyone thinks they have the greatest idea in the world, right? I'm all about go out there and figure it out. Go out, do something about it. Go out and, instead of reading all this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone makes mistakes, right? Everyone fails, but you learn from it, right? And you never give up. So it's all about like taking action. And I love the way you mentioned like having perspective, right? On don't not caring what other people are doing and just being core to what your values are, right? Like staying very grounded and understand what that sense of purpose and why you're doing certain things, right? Is it freeing up some valuable time so you can spend it elsewhere and travel or whatnot? Having money, but is it really just to buy stuff, or is it really to help others with the additional income, right? Like other things that are really more impactful in your life today. And it all depends on where you're at in your life's journey, right? So it's different for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's the key thing. It's how do you take what it is that you're trying to achieve from that? And I think the other thing, just in terms of advice to entrepreneurs, is just staying positive. I've always said from the early days, the time I'm most scared is when everything is going well, because I'm just what it feels too good to be true. There's got to be something that is around the
Something's
corner.
out.
Um,
Exactly.
but I also feel like the flip side of that is when times are bad, I'm very positive, and I always think, right, this is going to get better, because firstly, when it's in that bad situation, I don't think it's good to feel down, because you need to be taking action and you've got to be doing something about it in order to take positive steps. And I also think that when things are going really well, it's good not to get carried away with yourself and feel like we're top of the world, this is amazing, because I feel like that's when actually you probably are most vulnerable. If you think you're incredible, but actually is someone taking the ground away underneath you, and
Yeah.
you're just completely unaware. So I think having that level of positivity definitely helps in the bad stages, but yeah, I think also a balance of um, yeah, don't get too carried away either and assume that you've made it, because I feel like once you get to that point, then maybe that's where things will become more difficult for you. So I think it's the balance is key. I think both ways. You can't feel like you're always playing defense in terms of what you're doing, but at the same time, yeah, I think you need an element of humility behind yourself as well. And I think that helps when you're trying to get trust from people, whether that's your own team, potential clients. If people get where you're coming from a lot more, I think that way.
Yeah, and just being genuine, right? And I love the fact that being optimistic during troubled times, during this pandemic, I always look at the bright side, which is
Right.
things can't get any worse.
Yeah.
So it's only positive from now on, right? And so what can I do? What can you control? And what kind of different avenues can generate revenue, or just ways to increase sales or awareness or presence or whatever it is, right? But I love the positivity, and a lot of people get so boggled down with like negativity by their surroundings, by media, by their peers. Like
Yeah.
surround yourself with positive people. Read up or listening to inspirational people, right? That you look up to. And that's as an entrepreneur, I've been doing this for a couple of years, but it's always like mindset. It's all about like positive reinforcements. And
Yeah.
as much as that may sound like, oh, the secret, right? It's like, a lot of people are like, well, it doesn't apply to me. Well, it does in a subliminal kind of way, right? Like it's always there in the afterthought.
It absolutely is. And another quote that I always like is, if you believe you can do it or you can't do it, you're right. So the sense of being that if you think that you can do something and achieve something, you'll put everything behind making that happen. You might not know how you're going to get there,
Yeah.
but you're going to do absolutely everything you can to make that happen and make it succeed. And the same is true that if you're not bought into it and you don't think it's going to work, you're going to make excuses. And whether you even realize you're doing it or not, it's not going to work because you're not bought into it. So I think actually having that, I think belief is really important. Understanding what it is you're trying to do and then putting everything behind it and truly believing that you're going to make that happen. Even if you fail, I think it's one of those of like shoot for the moon and get somewhere close, as opposed to, yeah, I think if you just don't have right attitude, it's why try, honestly. So, and the flip side is completely true that you'll find a way, and it's everyone will always say it's kind of you'll have a plan, and that plan won't go to plan, but at the same time you should have a plan. So it's just going to, because you want to at least know this is what we're going to try, This is where we're going to start, and then you adjust course. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think having that level of belief and positivity behind what you're doing is crucial, because if you don't believe in yourself, then no one else is going to do it for you. You have to make it happen.
And it is a very lonely journey, right? As an entrepreneur or business owner. So surround yourself. There's a lot of groups out there and people and business owners. We kind of want to help as many people as possible, right? Because we want them to achieve success and also not go through the same growing pains that we have gone through. And that's the whole sense of community that I find as business owners and entrepreneurs, right? Like we are all kind of in the same boat, and we want to strive to do good, right? As humanity and humans, we're all about like just helping others. So I love you sharing all this great information, Kevin.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'd add to that is I've been lucky enough to meet extremely successful entrepreneurs and business owners who are achieving things that could be kind of like 100 times of the level that I'm at, if not more. And the one thing, sometimes I feel there's a lot of negativity around extremely successful people. Oh, they must be ruthless and they can't be nice people to deal with. And I'm sure there's people like that around, but in my experience, most of the successful people I've met are actually genuinely very nice people, and they've got to where they are because they have a level of self-awareness that they learn from what they're doing. They've got people to buy into their journey to help support them because they've set up a win-win relationship of you're not here to make me rich, we're here to grow together and we'll share it together. And I do feel like hopefully it's a case of like doing the right thing, and it might say what's the saying around like just nice guys finish last or something like that. But I genuinely believe actually if you do the right thing, you should finish first. There's no reason why you can't be nice to everyone along the way and succeed. I genuinely think that if you're doing the right thing, I think you'll have more chance of achieving success, as opposed to if in the short term, sure, you can screw people over and make a buck, but I don't think it's certainly not what I'm setting out to achieve. And I think for most people, it's actually how do you make an impact in the medium to long term. And I think the answer to that is doing the right thing, because that's what gets remembered. Equally, it gets remembered probably even more so if you do the wrong thing. So yeah, I think kind of keeping that positivity on the long-term side of things is important as well. You're doing the right thing. It might not pay off today, but actually, yeah, it will do. Just stick with it.
Exactly. I know we only have a couple minutes left. I just wanted to mention, like, so if you surround yourself with like negative people or people like your five closest people, family, friends, or whatever, you're probably the average of them because you're talking very similar mindsets, very similar. You're probably doing the similar activities and hobbies. So surround yourself with positive people that you aspire to become, right? Or listen or read up on those people that you want to become, and go to these conferences and look up to people and be curious, right? Because if you don't, then you're going to be the average, like everyone else that is within your circle, right? And
Absolutely.
and I early days, and I'm sure yourself, I did that, and now I'm able to strive to become a business owner, right, an entrepreneur, and enjoy every moment of it. And I love the fact that you're sharing all this great insight, because it seems like we're connecting, right? Because we have very similar like-mindedness, because we're both entrepreneurs, right? And we all are trying to do good in this whole SEO space or digital media space. There's good people and bad people, and I'm just surrounding myself with good ones.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's James Altucher who also runs a podcast, but he said you're not just the average of the five closest people that you spend time with, but you're the average of the 5 TV shows you watch, the news outlets you
Consume and all that.
and yeah, like I very rarely read any kind of national media coverage, but the podcasts you listen to, all of those they reinforce messages probably in a lot of cases in their own bubbles, and I think the ones that you pay attention to dictate your own thoughts, and like we were saying, what you think can dictate what you achieve. So I think making sure that actually the information you're consuming is paying off for you is really important.
Exactly. So one last question, aside from business, it seems like you're, fairly successful in the business end of things. What other things in terms of pillars of your life are very, very important today as opposed to before you started your company?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I've tried to have more of a balance. Certainly in the past, I probably throw myself into work too much. And I think one of the big things actually for me is just actually taking time out to do things like spend time with friends and family, but also kind of like my own fitness. And like, I got back into playing tennis last year. I've been
Nice.
running quite consistently, training for a marathon, which I've never done before. Um, and I feel like that just helps me to switch off a bit more. So kind of having that distinction between, yeah, kind of like the work day and actually just trying to switch off a bit more. And exercise for me has kind of become more of a part of how do I, yeah, not like I'll go for a run and won't even listen to music or anything like that. Like that's my own kind of way of almost like meditation in a weird way of like just getting out there and yeah, switching off a little bit more than I would do previously. But yeah, for me, sport has always been like a big thing, football in
Yeah.
particular, and trying to
Yeah.
yeah, kind of have my own hobbies outside of this and prioritize and protect some time for doing things that I feel like makes me fresher from when I do work. I can then focus because I'm taking time to yeah, kind of connect with people, but also protecting my own time, if that makes sense as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, during this pandemic, I've been really focused on health, right?
Yeah,
Really clean, whole foods. I've been reading about paleo to keto to veganism to,
yeah,
carnivore. You got to know your stuff, right? So for me, I've tested, tried. I've
yeah,
started shopping at local farms, organic farms, just
yeah, that's
taking
great.
care of yourself, right? And this was an aspect that I've never really understood or had any interest of until I really last couple years, it's all about like, look, having a strong immune system, understanding like the mindset piece, right? And
Exactly.
surrounding yourself with like-minded people that are also doing this, right? And so it's very encouraging. Like if you actually put your mind to it and want to do something, you can definitely do that and learn as much as possible, make mistakes, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
have that
definitely.
whole passion of like, have fun with life. Life is short, right?
It
Go
is.
out and do something about it.
I feel stuff like that. Actually, the marketer in me, I'm always looking at metrics. So stuff like Strava. How do I get a quicker 5K run in? Or I actually went on a vegan diet that I stuck to since a couple of years ago now, and but just again measuring body fat percentage, stuff like that. So it's like it doesn't mean that much, but I just find it's one of those self gratification things of okay, well things are going in the right direction. That's good.
Yeah. I think being happy ultimately, right? Like owning your decisions and the process, right? And having fun with everything that you encounter, do, people you in relationships, community, everything is all about balance too.
I
So
think that's pretty true.
I really appreciate your time, Kevin. I know I want to wrap this up. So how can some of the listeners get a hold of you, reach out to you, learn a little bit about your business?
Sure.
And
It's probably best through, I mean, happy to give my email out, which is just kevin@resignal.com. If anyone has any questions, definitely drop me an email. And I always say with things like this, it's kind of, you expect, oh, I won't send an email because you get bombarded. And actually quite often it's not. You'll get kind of like two or three and I'm more than happy to help people. So yeah, happy to do that. I'm quite active on social. Um, LinkedIn probably in particular, so feel free to connect. Twitter, my Twitter handle is Kev Gibbo. So yeah, happy to answer any questions and connect with people for sure.
awesome. Well, all the show notes will be there with all the links to any of your assets. And I really want to thank you, Kevin. I know you're busy and I know you're joining us from London, England. So thank you for all the great insights and valuable information that you provided the audience members. And
Sure.
have a great, safe rest of your day. Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you. You
Kevin.
too. Thanks, John.